Good morning, good afternoon, good day to planet Earth. We have a very special friend of mine and colleague and inspiration, mentor, teacher, whatever you want him to be. He has been. He is Dr. John Waterhouse, former director of the Asia-Pacific Palmer Alumni for many years, probably 2 decades or more, serving as the ombudsman to the association, the Chiropractors Association, in a couple of its manifestations, endlessly serving in his state of Victoria, the professionals and profession. I can't speak highly enough of this man, and still in practice, aligning people's brains and bodies. Dr. John, welcome.
Buongiorno, Giuseppe.
Buona fortuna, Giovanni. Waterhouse,
Sì.
Acqua Casa.
Acqua Casa. Translates into almost any language you like, actually.
That's it, yeah. Can you give me the German version?
Johann Wasserhaus.
Wasserhaus. That's easy. That sounds English.
There you go.
Where do we start with someone with such a long history and looking so young?
Well, I'll take the... No, I think you need to clean your glasses, though. Put them on back to... There you go. That's more like it.
John,
good now, I reckon.
In all seriousness, as they say, you've had your finger on the pulse of chiropractic in Australia. What's your first thought on that crazy issue? The future, the past. What are you thinking of right now at this stage of your life?
I suppose the one thing I've tried to do during my career with the profession one way and another is to help advance it to the stage where it sits alongside primary care as an essential part of health delivery for all of us. And I think it's certainly come a long way in that time, because I go back prior to the time of registration and education institutions and all the rest of it. So it has progressed enormously. I guess my main fear now is that I'm seeing, regrettably, that the quality of the graduates is not quite what it used to be. I don't think that they're as readily equipped as we were. Now, back in my day, certainly, it was probably fair to say that we weren't all that well equipped in many ways. We had an awful lot of zeal and enthusiasm, but not a lot of practical skills. And you learn that very quickly once you start in your first year of practice. And it's probably unfair for me to be overly critical, given the fact that I've been in practice for as long as I have now, and things come to me automatically, whereas the students are still learning. But I do think that there's too many techniques out there that they're trying to teach at the institutions, and the kids are coming out a little bit confused and not having enough skill sets in one area. That's just a bit of a concern, and I hope that can change.
So you go back to a day where there was no registration for chiropractors.
Correct. Yes.
What was that like?
In some respects, it was a lot freer, because we had all care and no responsibilities in a way. There was no legislation that governed what we did, what we said, how we did it, and when we did it, and to whom we did it. It was probably a lot more practice freedom than with all the regulatory things that we have to comply with today. But I do remember I happened to be one of the members of the Victorian inquiry that represented the profession to the politicians. And this was back in 1978. And that was an interesting exercise, going before a parliamentary committee of inquiry, trying to extol the virtues of having chiropractic registered. And of course, we were successful. It was a bit of a traumatic time, because at the time, the state premier had basically dangled a carrot in front of us and said, well, you get a teaching institution happening, He said, I'll give you registration. Well, of course, there was no teaching institution. That's what spawned what was then called the ICC, which eventually morphed into what is now the RMIT. So that was fairly demanding times in terms of the number of people that were involved in trying to get all that put in place. And we had a lot of very wonderful people involved at many, many different levels in making it all happen.
So did you front up to this committee? Did you verbally give
evidence? Yep.
Wow. Where was it held?
That was held at the Victorian Parliament itself, in one of the committee rooms.
Well, that's a watershed.
It was, yeah, absolutely, it was a watershed. And some of the questions the politicians asked us showed their ignorance of what chiropractic was and does. In fact, I remember one of them said, "Oh, the only reason you help people is that you touch them." Quite literally.
And you know, I don't know how many years later, when I was on TV in 2002, they said the same blooming thing.
Yeah. Oh.
And they're probably not wrong.
Well, absolutely. Touching a patient in the appropriate manner, obviously.
It's something they never do. Doctors don't touch anybody anyway.
Well, they sit on the other side of the desk and with their prescription pad in hand. Yep.
Yeah. And that's amazing. What else comes to mind as something like that in your history? Because you've represented us on many occasions. Was there any other pinnacle turning points come to mind?
Well, I think some of the things I've had some pleasure from, may sound like a weird thing to say, but in representing patients in court cases. I well recall a particular court case. It was a work cover case. And this chap had the misfortune of, he was in the building industry, and he was up on a scaffold, and the scaffold collapsed and he landed on a pile of bricks down on the ground, which didn't do him much good, as you can well imagine.
No.
Anyway, it eventually got to a court case where they were trying to wriggle out of it, and I was ushered into the court to give my evidence, and of course the opposing barristers were trying to knock me for six, and I had all my clinical notes there, which were well written. At least I thought they were well written, and they started badgering me in the cross-examination and so on, and I didn't budge from my line. Eventually they gave up because they realized they weren't going too far, and got out of the room once I'd finished. And one of the attending solicitors for the patient concerned came out and said, "Thanks very much." He said, your records have going to help us a lot. Anyway, I didn't think much more of it, but the next day the patient came in and said it was my records that won the case for him. Because the medical records were so poor, they had nothing to go on. And he gave me a nice bottle of whiskey for my troubles, which was rather nice as well.
I hope you declared that to the tax man.
Pardon, what was that?
You know, we laugh about it, but that's amazing, John, because you don't get a lot of chiropractors giving evidence like that at any point now.
No.
Do you? No. Not really.
No, not really. No.
And it seems
but
like
the other role.
Yep.
Sorry, right, Joe. Yeah. No, I was going to say the other role I'm still involved with, although that's with the corona thingy and so on, it's knocked it on the head a little bit, has been with the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. I'm a tribunal member, and I've had the dubious pleasure, I suppose you could call it, in sitting on tribunal hearings for practitioners who perhaps have done the wrong thing. Most of them have been fairly inconsequential, but a couple of them have been doozies. And that's when you realise that there are some rather stupid practitioners out there that frankly do the wrong thing and deserve to get whatever punishment comes their way. Yeah. So it's a privilege to be in that position, and that's an onerous one in a way, and sitting in judgment on your own colleagues. It's not a nice feeling sometimes, but it has to be done.
Yeah, I did it once, and I could only say to myself regarding that I am an asset to whoever the defendant was and whether they'd done the right or wrong thing, I always used to tell myself, I am going to do the best thing I can for you, and I imagine you would. So as onerous or hard as it was for you, at least they had a good man, behind them, to be fair. Yeah, and you certainly...
Well, you really don't get to be a tribunal member unless you're going to be fair and reasonable, but what the regulations require.
Yeah. Anything else, mate? Anything else come to mind?
Oh gosh.
You were the ombudsman for the association. Any comments on that?
Well, there was one particular case which I don't suppose we can go into great detail about, that I got shafted on, unfortunately, but it was one of those things. But generally speaking, my role as ombudsman wasn't particularly difficult. Most of the issues that came across my desk were handled very easily. Just a matter of disputes that shouldn't have got to the level that they had. It was just a matter of butting heads together and saying, well, come on, sort this out and do what's right.
Yeah, I remember that occasion you mentioned, and sometimes those things happen as an exit point, don't you think?
Yes, they do. And that's when I exit.
And not only do you have all those diplomatic sort of roles, but when it comes to patient care, you were and still are a prime activator methods instructor, yes?
Yes, correct. In fact, we've got a seminar coming up in about 3 weeks' time with all the RMIT students, and we've got close to 100 of them coming for that seminar, which is really
huge. That's enormous.
It is, yeah.
Great stuff.
Yep. So that'll be a lot of fun. We always make it fun because I think it should be not only instructional but interesting at the same time.
And it's always a good contrast to what they're currently learning, the activator. They can either call it, well, that's not for me, or they go, oh, another way of thinking. And I think that's so important.
Exactly. Yep. It's just another, I hate to use the word, it's another tool in the toolbox, because I guess it is a tool being an instrument, but it's a total process of corrective care for patients, as you do yourself with your atlas orthogonal. And some people can't get their head around that a little clicky thing can actually make any difference. But when you tell patients, those who are interested, that there's a whole lot of science behind it, and it follows just simple engineering principles and so on, that they start to get it. And of course,
that's what I love about it, that the manual care is so wonderful. I've had a lot of manual care, but then there's a resonance and a state and a patient quality that needs that instrument generated vector,
exactly,
and they respond to it, and it's they need to be exposed to that, because there is a population of people that respond well to that subtlety.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And I think that the simplest way I describe it to patients is that using the old mathematical formula, force equals mass times acceleration, I'll tell them, if you need a force of 10 to move a bone, you can play with 5 times 2 or 2 times 5. It's just the same. I said, I'm a big mass of 5 and a small acceleration of 2, but the instrument is a small mass of 2, but with an acceleration of 5. It still gives the force of 10. So, why fight it?
Yeah, and it also brings a kind of a standardization. There's so much variation in the manual world of standardizes a lot of it, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I think the thing that patients like about it, number one, it doesn't hurt, and they don't feel any soreness. Generally speaking, they don't feel any soreness after it. They get the benefit sooner with less anger along the way. So once they know it's not going to hurt, they just relax that much more. It makes it so much easier.
So what would you like to see in the future, John? Any thoughts about the direction we're taking in Australia? Any thoughts around that? I know you will have. Anything?
You're thinking more in the sort of the political sense, or in the the way the profession itself can possibly advance?
Yeah, the profession, the profession
Okay.
itself, what's important at the moment that we embrace to move forward?
Well, I think that probably the most important thing is for the association to, first of all, to more actively, excuse me, more actively respond to some of the adverse criticism that comes through in the media. And I just don't see them doing enough of that. They're playing cutesy footsie, I think, wanting to have more acceptance by the medical profession particularly. And I don't think we'll ever get that totally anyway. So I think that's pushing the brown stuff uphill in the wrong direction. But probably the most important thing the profession needs to be doing, which the members are doing at the local level, is getting far more publicity and understanding of what chiropractors can and cannot do. There's just not enough public education out there. And even things like the chiropractic spinal healthcare week and so on. And they might say that it's very, very successful, but a lot of practitioners I speak to hasn't brought a single person to their offices. So I don't know how they measure their success. And the public, it's difficult with the APRA regulations to advertise a great deal because then you're advertising as an individual. And as you well know, advertising is very much restrained. And this is across all professions, not just our own. But we have information out to people for them to be informed and therefore make an informed choice of what they want to do with their healthcare. And I just don't see enough of that being done at the moment.
And rewinding a bit, John, what was your reason for entering chiropractic?
Oh, okay. That was, well, back in my day, most of the students that went to study chiropractic were either family members or relatives of some description of already practicing chiropractors, or for those who had received healthcare from a chiropractor and it changed their lives around. And the latter was the case for me. I used to, as a teenager, get crippling migraine headaches that used to wipe me out for a couple of days or so with all the auras and vomiting and God knows what else that went with it. And this is back in the mid-50s I'm talking about now. And our local GP told my parents to take me to a chiropractor. And my parents had never heard of chiropractic because very few people had back in those days. But back in those days also, you generally did what the doctor told you to do.
Right.
So my parents dutifully took me to the chiropractor, and as I say, the rest is history.
So where were you? Were you in Australia? Or
this was in the UK. And the chiropractors I went to nurtured me because I was always inquisitive and asking questions, and that hasn't stopped, as you've probably noticed. And they nurtured me, and the rest is history. Yep.
And in 1950s England, it was hard enough to find one.
Yes, it was. There were very, very few on the ground. Yep. Yeah.
So what did you do? How old were you then?
I was 16 at the time.
And then when did you chuff off to America?
As soon as I finished high school.
Wow.
19.
Holy moly.
Yep. Because I was planning a totally different career path. And it's this turned my head around and thinking, well, no, I want to do this. This is very interesting. And I didn't waver from it.
So who were your...
Sorry. I was going to say 55 years later, I'm still going.
Who were your notable mentors and teachers back then at the college?
At the college, I would have been Virgil Strang was probably the chief one that comes to mind.
Now, isn't that funny that many years later, he was then the president, and you had the same teacher decades before. What an amazing continuity.
Yep.
Okay, who else?
He was an amazing man, and there were a number of others. Gilbert Schmidl.
I had him too.
Oh gosh. Yes. Yeah.
Was Galen Price there?
Galen was still there, yes. And I'm trying to remember the guy that used to teach neurology. Can't think of his mind at the moment. He had a wicked sense of humour.
We'll come back to you. We need to think of who
Yeah,
it was.
okay.
Yeah, so
I'll come back.
there were some great mentors back then, and
Yeah, Don Farrow was another one.
Pharaoh.
Yeah,
He was
some
here,
great
wasn't
people. Yes, he was. Yeah, Roy Hildebrandt was another one who taught X-ray at that particular time. Was the guru of the day, I
he?
guess.
Yeah.
And of course, Dave Palmer. He was the giant of the college at the time, being the president, and
Yeah, you actually
he really put chiropractic. Yeah, he probably put chiropractic on the map somewhat more ethically and sensibly than his forebears.
Yes, because he was coming from a whole different generation of education
Yes.
and standards, wasn't he?
Yes.
So this,
Yeah, and he
for
knew
those who don't know,
he
he's
had
the
to.
third generation.
Yeah, and he knew he had to put it on a business model
Mm.
for it to be successful, and he was extraordinarily successful.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history there.
Yes. So what's your parting words for your thoughts on the future, John? What do you think? Are we dead in the water or
Oh, definitely not.
moving along?
Definitely not. No. Chiropractic stands on its truth and on its principles, and the medical profession will never really quite come to understand that. And I don't think we should really be either afraid of the medical profession or necessarily try to court their what's the word I'm looking for? Acceptance. You know, the patients know what we can do, and they will keep coming to us. And I think we just need to, as I said a little earlier, we need to widen the knowledge of the general public to what chiropractic can do and how it can help them. And the profession will continue to grow on that basis.
And I think you mentioned that other pivotal, primary, basic first principle, the patient decides.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is what's not, what's increasingly taking over is this centralization of power and direction, and this is what's right for you, and dictating based upon usually the sale of something. And that's the problem, isn't it, with chiropractors? We don't make anyone any money other than, well, the living we make. But yeah, the patient's number one, isn't it?
Yes. Well, the phrase of the day is patient-centered care. I mean, really, it's never been anything but that, or shouldn't have been anything but that.
Yes.
And our focus must be on the patient that's in front of us at the time, and delivering to them the best care that we can, given the constraints that their body might have in the first place. Unfortunately, some patients come in, as you know, with unrealistic expectations of what the care is going to deliver for them. And I have to spend some time telling patients, look, you can be better, but you can't be completely better. It's too late for that. You have to learn to accept that there'll be a limit to which care can go, and then make the other changes necessary in your life to maximize the benefit that you've got. And then maintain.
And isn't it a great irony that, it's always been patient-centered and their choice to come to us, whereas in your case, you were referred by the family doctor, which is...
Yes, I was. Yeah, which was very rare. Very rare. He was an enlightened doctor. Very much enlightened. Yeah.
Well, John Waterhouse, I'm glad to know you, glad to have been guided by you, and hopefully we'll chat again.
Oh, indeed we will, Joan. I look forward to more of a direct face-to-face when this wretched corona thing is done and dusted. All right, mate. You look after yourself and enjoy your practice.
See you, John. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Cheers, Joe. Bye.